Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree and today I'm tackling the Marvel vs. DC debate, specifically why I chose DC over Marvel. I know this is somewhat contentious, but, I'm going to go ahead and lay out my reasons and my experiences and kind of go with the flow. So, little backstory first. When I was growing up, I was a kid in the late 80s, early 90s, and I was deep heavy into comic books. I loved comic books. Now, there were two comic books I read them, well, two comic book characters or franchises I read the most. Number one, Spider-Man. I read monthly. I read Amazing Spider-Man. I read Spectacular Spider-Man. I read Spider-Man and Web of Spider-Man. I couldn't get enough of the wall crawler. I also read Spider-Man magazine. And yes, I even watched the Spider-Man cartoon despite my distaste for cartoons. The other one was X-Men, and I read everything I could get my hands on. I read New Mutants, I read X-Force, X-Factor, Uncanny X-Men, Wolverine. Even though I don't like Wolverine, I still read his book. Cable, I read everything that had anything to do with the X-Men. I read it. Generation X, all of it. I was like knee-deep in X-Men. I couldn't get enough X-Men. But you know what I didn't read when I was a kid growing up? I didn't read Avengers or Daredevil or Ghost Rider or the Fantastic Four or anything else Marvel produced. Nothing. I had no interest in anything. But I did read a lot of Batman. Now, I mostly read Detective Comics, and I read Batman and Robin, and then I think it was The Adventures of Robin. So I was like heavy deep into the Gotham City lore. And then I read random comic books, whatever I would come across. I would just grab a cool comic. If the cover looked cool, I would buy it. So I just read random shit. Now, as far as superheroes go, so here's my story. I started out with, like a lot of people my age, the very first superhero movie I ever watched was 1977 or 1976, Richard Donner's Superman, starring Christopher Reeves. Now, when I was a kid, this was a movie I watched regularly just because it was something to watch, but it was one of those movies that I didn't like. My dad liked it more than I did, so I watched it a lot with him because he liked it. But it was one of those movies that I just saw right through it. It was one of those movies that I just never, it's like a god among men and he's pulling cats out of trees and helping old ladies cross streets. Fucking boring. So I grew to disdain Superman. And then in my early teen years, when I was about 13, they came on TBS. They had a TV show, Lois and Lane: The New Adventures of Superman. And so I started to watch that. And they also had a TV show, and I don't remember where it aired, but it was The Flash. And I started watching that, and I thought it was pretty cool. I had never read a Flash comic, but I thought the character was pretty cool. And I thought the TV show was pretty cool. So through TV, I started to get introduced to new comic book characters that I otherwise wouldn't have been introduced to. Fast forward a few years, I'd already seen all four of the Superman movies. I'd seen all of the Batman movies up to that point. I'd seen movies like The Mask and Men in Black. So comic book movies were basically hit or miss in the 90s. And then Superman Returns came along. And I was one of those, I was like, all right, it's a Superman movie. Let's check it out. So I watched it, and I remember hating every second of it. It was boring as shit. And I remember asking myself, why the fuck is Superman so goddamn popular? So against my will, I watched the first season of Smallville with a friend of mine because he was a fan of the show, and he wanted to hang out. And so, hanging out at his house, we would watch Smallville. I couldn't get into that shit. So I always told everybody I was a Marvel fan. I always said, yeah, I prefer Marvel over DC, even not knowing what I was talking about. Then something changed. In the late 2000s, early 2010s, I went to college and I started studying comic books as an art form. I actually took a class called Superheroes and Antiheroes, where we analyzed superheroes. And I started to look at the world from a different perspective. you know, I got an education and I saw things differently than I did before. So I decided to buy a big box of random comic books off of eBay. It was 50 comic books for like $50 or something like that. It was like a big, just this great big box of comic books, just random shit. I just wanted to explore different comic books beyond what I had already been reading. Now, the reason why I got out of comic books, which we'll backtrack, this was me getting back into comic books. So the reason I got out of comic books is twofold. The comic books I read the most in the 90s was X-Men and Spider-Man. Now, you know what they did to the X-Men and Spider-Man in the 90s. And on the Spider-Man front, they did the fucking Clone Saga, and they fucking capped it off with goddamn unforgivable paper bag head. And I threw away that issue. I bought that issue. I read it. I literally ripped it up, threw it in the trash, and swore I would never buy a Spider-Man comic as long as I live. Because that fucking offended me to my core. Fucking paper bag, man. Go to hell. And then on the X-Men side, it was Onslaught, which it was like, we had earlier in the decade the fantastic, amazing A+. Just can't say enough good things about the Age of Apocalypse. And then they decided, you know what? Let's just like repeat the Age of Apocalypse, only this time Xavier's the bad guy. And I was like, give me a fucking break. So I stopped reading X-Men. Since those were the primary comics I read, aside from just random shit from time to time, I just threw away, I literally tore up and threw away my entire comics collection. I had 200 books and they all went shredded into the dumpster. Sue me. I walked away. I was not interested. But then something else changed. Marvel and DC got into a pissing contest in the movie front. They started making movies like hella crazy. And for a while, DC was doing Kick-Ass with their Batman franchise, and then Marvel came along with the MCU, and they flipped Warner a middle finger and said, what you gonna do, bitches? Now, I'm not a fan of the Avengers, like, even at all. In fact, I literally, physically, actively hate Tony Stark with a fiery fucking passion. It makes me sick. He is the linchpin of the MCU. I hated those goddamn Spider-Man movies because they were all fucking Tony Stark and his little Spider-Boy. Fuck off. I'm a socialist. I will never fucking give a fuck about capitalist of all capitalists, Tony Stark. He just pisses me off. Everyone's all, but he gave up war profiteering for clean energy. Yeah, that's worse. He fucking monopolized clean energy, the fucking capitalist pig. Fuck Tony Stark. But Thor was a good movie. I saw it in theaters and I thought, damn, this is a good fucking movie. I loved Thor. Now, growing up as a kid, I was a witch. I was pagan, and I was really into Norse mythology. So Thor, the Norse god, was somebody I actually had an affinity for. So I was kind of already interested in the character, but I was kind of thought the Marvel character was disrespectful to the real Thor. So I never read the comics, but I thought the movie was pretty fucking good. So I watched Iron Man, and I wanted to barf. That movie bored me to fucking tears. Then I watched Captain America, and it was too much goddamn waving the flag. You know, go fucking America, and I'm like, go to fucking hell, actually. You know, so I decided I'm not a fan of this MCU as it was developing. But then I saw the Avengers, the first one in theaters, and I thought, alright, this is pretty fucking good. I still didn't like the concept of the Avengers. It was like literal rubbish books that couldn't sell to save their lives, and they just lumped them all together because they're like, fuck it. Let's see if we can sell some comics if we just make a super team, because it worked for DC. Only, you know, we'll get to that when how DC did it right and Marvel basically fucked it up. But let's not go there yet. So like everybody else, the MCU took over the universe, and I was just like, you know what, fuck it, I'll watch, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man and all this shit, Captain Marvel and everything else. So I started watching the MCU movies. And as I was going along, I started to realize I was watching movies I didn't like. I wasn't enjoying the movies. I was just watching them to watch them. So then I started watching the DC side. I watched Batman versus Superman. Fucking loved it. I was like, yes, please, give me more of this. Then I watched Justice League, and I was like, there you go. That's how you do a superhero movie. And then I watched Suicide Squad, and I was like, what the fuck is wrong with everybody shitting on this movie? It's just fucking glorious. I loved it. So, let's go back to that in 2015? 2016, I bought this big box of comic books. So I went from a stretch from like 1998 to 2016 where I didn't read comics at all. But I did watch the movies, and I still watched some of the cartoons and some of the animated films and things like that. So and I was still collecting trading cards, so I still maintained an interest in comics as a whole, just not the books themselves because of fucking Paperback Man. I'm not gonna lie. So I got a whole bunch of Justice League, DC, Green Lantern, and Flash comics in that box. And at first I was disappointed. I was like, shit, this is a bunch of garbage. But because I paid for it and I had nothing else to do, I decided to go ahead and fucking read some of them. I flipped through some of the Green Lanterns, and I thought, you know what? This is actually more interesting than I thought it would be. And then I flipped through some of the Flash comics, and I fell in love instantly. Batman I was already interested in, so I read some of the Batmans, and I thought, he's still got it. DC knows what they're doing. Then I got to Superman. I'm not going to lie, I was dreading reading that first issue of Superman. I picked it up, I flipped through it, and at first I was just flipping through it. I wasn't reading it, I was just looking at the pictures, and I thought, you know what, wait a minute, this is actually good. So I went back to the start, and I read every panel. And I thought, no way, Superman is not a good comic book character. He's a fucking Boy Scout who takes cats out of trees with the power of a god. So I decided to read another Superman comic, and I was like, holy shit, he actually is good. This is good writing. This is good art. And I was like blown away. I was literally blown away. I was like, no way. I always thought Superman was rubbish. So I signed up for the DC Universe app, and I signed up for the Marvel Unlimited app, and I signed up for Comixology app. And I started reading. I went back to the beginning, and I started reading old issues, the early days of Action Comics and Detective Comics, and some of the old Marvel comics from back in the day, the ones that would eventually lead to the superhero comics. And I noticed a pattern as I was reading the comics. I noticed a pattern. I was not interested in anything Marvel was doing outside of X-Men or Spider-Man, and I was finding myself interested in everything DC was doing. I was really enjoying the DC comics. I would read a DC comic and I was like ready to read the next issue. I was binging DC comics. I was forcing myself to read Marvel comics, and then I realized, why am I torturing myself reading Marvel comics when I'm not interested in Marvel comics? Last night I watched The Flash, and I'm going to say something controversial. I've already tweeted it out, but I'm going to say controversial. The Flash, the one with Batman and Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is in it. Batman and Wonder Woman and Supergirl, the one that just came out like in May. Probably the best superhero movie of all time. At least in the top 5. Absolutely in the top 5. 100% by itself, 100% better than all of the fucking Avengers movies. And that includes the goddamn spinoffs. The entire MCU. By itself, better than the entire MCU. Save maybe Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't really consider them superhero, but they are comic book. But they're more like Star Wars. They're like space opera. Still pretty fucking cool. But I realized over the years that I actually prefer DC to Marvel. I really liked the Aquaman movie. I really liked the both Wonder Woman movies. I loved them both. I actually prefer the second one, 1984, to the first one. I thought it was fucking awesome. I don't know why people shat on it. And that's when I decided to subscribe to some comic books. I subscribed to Action Comics, Detective Comics, The Flash, and then, yes, I did subscribe to an X-Men comic and a Spider-Man comic because I wanted to get back into them. Because I was finally, 25 years later, I was finally able to move past Paperback fucking head and give Spider-Man another chance. Because he had some damn good movies, I'm not going to lie. Especially that first Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi film. Fucking awesome. So I watched Spider-Man. I watched I watched them all. No Way Home, Far From Home, Homecoming. I watched them all. Didn't give a fuck about Homecoming. Couldn't fucking stand Far From Home. But No Way Home, one of the best fucking movies I've ever seen. Not just best superhero movies I've ever seen. One of the best movies I've ever seen. Absolutely top-notch fucking film. So I realized I still like Spider-Man. I still like the X-Men. Although I don't know what the hell's going on with the X-Men. Apparently they terraformed Mars and turned it into a sanctuary for mutants. Which is like, whatever. Not bad, but kind of like changes the whole dynamic of the X-Men. But, it's interesting. And I realized I love all the X-Men movies, even Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. I like Dark Phoenix more than I like anything in the MCU. Anything. There's nothing in the MCU. Except maybe, if it counts as MCU, I might like Far From Home better than Dark Phoenix. But I haven't decided yet. I have to watch both of them again. I will watch both of them again. I have Dark Phoenix on DVD. I will get Far From Home on DVD. Absolutely. I have Disney Plus, so I don't really need them. I can watch them on fucking Disney Plus. But, yeah, absolutely. So, toys. I've always, even when I was a kid, thought DC had better action figures than Marvel. So I would collect Justice League and Superman and Batman toys because as an action figure collector, they just made better toys. Even though I wasn't interested in the characters at the time, I was like, there's still better toys. Marvel never really, except for the Toy Biz X-Men, Marvel really never could get their footing in the toy business until they got to the Marvel Legends. But my problem with Marvel Legends, I have two beefs with it. Beef number one, they're fucking $22 figures, 6-inch scale. I prefer the 3 3/4 inch scale, and I want to pay like $10 for a figure, not $22 for a figure. Thank you very much. Beef number two, there's too many goddamn Build-A-Figures. Like, Jesus fucking Christ, just charge us $50 for the fucking big figure and stop making me buy $120 worth of action figures I don't fucking care about just to get the big guy when I could just buy the big fucking guy for $40. Christ all goddamn mighty. I hate Build-A-Figure. I have never completed a Build-A-Figure, and I never will. Because I'm not going to buy fucking no-name superheroes I don't give a fuck about just to get the arm. I'm not going to do it. So, fuck Marvel Legends. So that's my beef with Marvel Legends. Damn good action figures, but Jesus Christ, a shitty-ass fucking business model. Fucking fuck off. So I buy a lot of DC superheroes because their action figures are actually better because you don't have the goddamn Build-A-Figure, and you can get a DC character 3 3/4 inch scale for like $7 plus tax. They're not 22 goddamn dollars. So I actually do have more DC characters than Marvel characters as far as toys go. So, what about I'm using air quotes here, DC Universe or DC Extended Universe or whatever the fuck fans are calling it, or DC's trying to call it, Warner's trying to call it. I don't fucking give a shit. I don't fucking need a shared universe. Just give me a fucking movie. As far as I'm concerned, The Dark Knight and Batman Forever already exist in the same universe as far as I'm concerned. I can stretch and retcon as needed to make them fit in the same universe. It's fine by me. It's fine by me. I don't need them to be in a shared universe. I'm just fucking happy to have fucking kick-ass Batman movies. So, with that being said, I actually do prefer DC to Marvel by a long shot. I am actively collecting the mainline New 52. I want to get everything published under New 52 mainline. And I say mainline because I don't want the fucking spin-offs. I just want basically the Justice League and the main characters from the Justice League, if that makes sense. So, the Flash comics, the Wonder Woman comics, the Green Arrow comics, Martian Manhunter, Cyborg, Superman, Batman, you know, those the core comics. I want to get them all. So I am actually actively collecting the New 52 because I loved the New 52. I thought it was fucking brilliant. I know a lot of people hate it. I do have some Rebirth, and I am enjoying the Rebirth that I do have, but I'm getting fed up with the fucking resets all the goddamn time. Always sweeping everything under the rug and starting over fresh. Like, Jesus Christ. I'm getting sick of it. So I'm basically, my comic book collecting is Legacy and New 52. I'll sprinkle in some Rebirth stuff as I come across it, but I'm not seeking it out. But I am seeking out New 52. I am seeking out Legacy. Legacy to me is everything before New 52. So this is pre and post Crisis. Everything pre and post Crisis. Not everything. Jesus Christ, I don't have that kind of money. But I'm picking from that pool. X-Men, I'm collecting 90s. Jim Lee X-Men. I'm collecting up to Onslaught. Onslaught is the cutoff. Nothing after Onslaught. And I'm not going to buy the Onslaught books. I might back it up and make the cutoff the Wedding of Cyclops and Jean Grey. But I don't know if that'll be the cutoff because I do like the Red and Slim books. And so I might collect the Red and Slim books. And I think those came out post-Wedding. So if those are post-Wedding, I will collect those. And I'll make Onslaught the cutoff. If not, then I'll make the Wedding the cutoff. If those are pre-Wedding, the Wedding will be the cutoff. Because I do want the Red and Slim books. Let's talk X-Men as a whole. So I like the blue team, gold team X-Men dynamic. So I like those characters, the ones from the cartoon, and I like the ones from the Jim Lee era. I do like the original Team X-Men. I thought they were pretty cool. I read every single one of them up to the reprints. So I've read every issue of X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, up to when it went into reprints. I didn't read the reprints, obviously, because why would I? And I read the Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix sagas, and I read the Mutant Massacre saga, and I read the Days of Future Past, and I hit the bullet points, basically. I have no interest in Deadpool. I will not touch Deadpool. I will not buy a comic book that has Deadpool on the cover, that features Deadpool in the story, or has Deadpool any implications or ties to Deadpool at all. Nothing to do with Deadpool. I will not buy Wolverine comics, but I will buy X-Men comics that have Wolverine in it, but I will not buy Wolverine comics by themselves. I will not buy Generation X. I will not buy X-Force or X-Factor, but I will have an assortment of New Mutants, and I have no interest in Excalibur. That should cover me as far as X-Men goes. Spider-Man, I'm selectively picking and choosing things pre-Clone Saga. Clone Saga is the cutoff. I do not buy anything from the Clone Saga on. I'm not interested. And I don't want to accidentally come across goddamn Paper Bag Man again, because I fucking stopped reading. I literally tore all my comic books, tore them up, and threw them in the trash, because Paper Bag Man offended me so much. I was done with. I was like, Christ, if this is what they're doing with comic books, I'm done. I'm out. I'm not interested anymore. So that's where I am on comic books and superheroes. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with my opinions, and stay cool.